Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Doe, Events and Communications Coordinator for BCLT. Welcome to BCLT's the Yuan Global Talks on Generative AI and Human Creativity. Today's talk will be on Commercializing Landscape of Gen AI 2024. Thank you for joining us. If you're not a speaker, please keep your microphones muted and cameras off. Please use the chat function to ask any question. Please forward all questions to the host and panelist option within the Zoom chat. Regarding Zoom settings, please see the view function on the upper right-hand corner to change your viewing perspective to fit your needs. In addition, on the bottom, please see the captions function to have live captioning at your display. The captioning function may sometimes be found on the More function at the bottom right-hand corner. Note that this program is being recorded. The recording will be released on our website and emailed to all registrants within about 2 weeks' time. If you're attending CLE credit, or if you are attending for CLE, please sign in via the link provided in the chat box. The CLE sign-in will be open for 1 week following this event. A certificate and evaluation form will follow after signing the sign-up sheet. Materials of the program can also be found within our webpage and also linked in the chat. I'll now turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Yuan Hao.
Thank you, Justin. So good evening and good morning. Welcome to Talk 2 of the Yuan Global Talk Series on Generative AI and Human Creativity. 大家早上好，欢迎来到生成式人工智能与人类创造力全球原对话系列2。My name is Hao Yuan, the hostess of this talk series. I'm a senior fellow of Berkeley Law, and since last year, I've been co-teaching a brand new course on AI, intellectual property, and human creativity. So facing this paradigm shift of human beings' creative process catalyzed by generative AI, this talk series aims to foster informative talks between voices from different spheres of the Gen AI ecosystem, especially from Asia and the United States. So the whole talk series will be simultaneously live streamed in China, thanks to IP House. In today's talk, we try to explore AI's challenging journey from this cutting-edge technological novelty to sustainable market solutions, especially those solutions that, in the long term, can augment human creativity rather than to displace it. We are very fortunate to have two seasoned entrepreneurs in the field with us today. Mr. Chlon Tang, founder and managing partner of the legendary Berkeley SkyDeck Fund, also a proud member of the Berkeley Golden Bear family, and Mr. Di Li, the visionary founder and CEO of XiaoIce, Microsoft's renowned AI spinoff in East Asia. So Chlon and Di, very glad to have you with us today. So at the outset of discussion, maybe we talk a little bit of the technology itself. I'm very curious, about your view of the current AI hype, largely centering around the large language models, particularly through the lens of market solution providers. So, Chlon, maybe you first.
Sure. So I've certainly, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm excited to have this conversation. I've definitely heard that feedback that we're in a hype cycle. A lot of people like to blame it on the VCs, and I definitely understand where that's coming from, because I've also spoken to a lot of VCs who talk about how important it is we have this constant wave after wave of a new hype cycle. That way we have more stories to invest in, and that way we have more stories to fundraise on. So I understand that, right? When we've just gone through this giant bubble in crypto, and perhaps I've had more than one person come up to me and say, is LLM just sort of meant to be a placement to happen in the crypto world? And I feel very strongly that that's not the case. My background is in E and computer science, so just from a purely technical perspective, I am convinced that Gen AI and LLMs are going to fundamentally change our world. I think in 100 years, I think in 500 years, I think in 2,000 years, historians are going to write about society, and they're going to talk about the pre-AI, pre-LM phase and the post phase. I honestly think it's that significant of a phase shift. The implications of what we have. I don't even want to. I don't like the word to say. I don't like the word that we've created these things. It's more like we've discovered them. Up until now, when you talk about computer science, when you talk about code, they were essentially extensions of what we wanted. They were tools. We gave them specific instructions. We said, do this specific calculation and give me the final result. And all that we've been doing for the last 6 years with the advent of computers is doing that calculation, doing that instruction following faster and faster and faster. And I think Gen AI and LLMs in particular are fundamentally a different creature. Like we've invented something or we've discovered something that can go beyond us. Like it's not following our specific instructions. It's able to draw insights and create in ways that we did not expect it to. So I think it's very exciting.
Thank you. That's very well. That actually that reminds me of what the legendary, first female or first human programmer, Ada Lovelace, said in the 19th century that, one day we might have a machine that we have more out than put in. So, Chung, your explanation makes me think maybe that's the fundamental change this time. It could generate more than we put in, right? So, okay. So Dee, I wonder, what do you think of the current LLM?
I think, basically, I think we must keep calm. From the technology side, actually, since we have been in this area for more than 10 years, we have seen very similar waves happen before. From the technology side, actually, it's very exciting because we are very much close to the year. But some similar things also happened time by time because the business model is actually didn't iterate into a new model. We are using new technology, but we are still using a very old business model that happened before. And it's very interesting that actually, especially in China, that we can see now players about AI technologies in market are actually more of them recently come out. They are maybe 2 years or 1 year before now, and the old players all died. They died because of a lot of different problems, and the problems actually kept the same. So maybe I can explain more detail later. But I think we must to keep calm that we somehow, in this industry that we everyone do not want to say that, well, I'm calmed down because innovation is so important. But still, we need to calm down because technology is not the year itself. Technology is only the path to a year. Once you have a really fundamental business model, then you can actually run the world. So that is the thing. That means that here now we are actually having a very large bubble. Yeah.
Several great points I'd like to unpack later, Dee. But I'll just one particular interesting to me is that you mentioned that the technology might have a very revolutionary side, but the business model sort of doesn't catch up. So that would be one major point we're going to discuss in a short while today. But before that, I just wonder, this question is for both of you. I've been reading that as powerful as large language model is, actually it has its own pros and cons, and seems that many AI pioneers like Yan Yanku or Noam Chomsky, or Julia Paul, who wrote this seminal book, The Book of Why, in 2018, the Turing Award winner, they all agreed that the large language models, they can only grasp correlation. It has this superior, excellent ability to grasp correlation between events, but not enough capability to understand causation. So I'm wondering, like, from your point of view, would this have implications on the market solutions?
Sometimes we actually miss. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, please, Dee.
Okay. Let me tell you a story. Sometimes we confuse the AI create a lot of values and the value that AI company got back. There is a media in China actually came to me that he said that the large language model helped the media to create a very good draft of all the report, all the articles. They used to pay 1,050, 500 to the drafter to do the reporter. They want us to use large language model to help them. It actually helped a lot because the media has over 1,000 articles every month. But afterwards, I asked how much the media got them paid for the large language model replace the human-made reporter. He said, okay, 1,000 token, less than only maybe 2 cents.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that is to say that I make a calculation. Even if we grasped all the medias in China's draft, that makes a 2 million Chinese yuan market a year. That means, generative AI actually opened up a new year. That is the super exciting point of the technology, that it's a high added value technology. But we charge with a cost. We charge with a low added value business model. That makes that you can create a lot of values, but actually you didn't got money back. That is always the key. That happened before because image recognition actually changed the world, especially in China, that everyone for every day using image recognition time for time. But there is no any AI companies can actually run on the revenue from purely image recognition. They had to sell hardwares. They had to cooperate with government to get the revenue. That happened before because it's actually create high add value but charge low add value. So it's happened and will happen again. Yeah.
That's very interesting, Dee, because what you just said was a great illustration of this huge gap between value creation and monetizing on that value you created. And yeah, so definitely there's something, that's something important on entrepreneurs venturing into this field need to think about this period. But let me turn to Chuan, that regarding this correlation versus causation problem of LLM models, Chuan, do you think that might have implications on a practical level?
Yeah, I've seen Yuan's. So Yuan is a leading AI researcher at Meta, and he has very much been at the forefront of the argument that we can define the limits of what an LLM is, and we should know that there are certain tasks that an LLM will never be able to conduct. And he has lots of different ways of thinking about it. And I mean, certainly he's a brilliant researcher, and I think he has a point, but I also think he's missing the point. I think that the idea that we can fundamentally characterize, like we can write an equation to define what an LLM is just it's not correct. It's not an accurate way of understanding where this field is going to evolve to. You know, when the analogy that I come up with is, what is the actual difference in the biology of the human brain and the primate brain, right? I mean, you know, let's not even talk about at the DNA level. We all know that we're 99% the same. But at the biological level, if you look at the structures of our brain and a monkey brain, it's the differences are minor. But whatever it is, whatever it was, that minor improvement in, you know, density of the neuron or the distribution of white matter, etc., allowed humans to evolve a level of consciousness that is fundamentally, dramatically different from what a primate could, right? So how could you have scientifically evaluated that and said, if we just incrementally change the structure of this organ, it's going to lead to all of these additional impacts? And I really think it's the same thing. I really think there is a step function here. I think this up until the arrival of DLM, you look at CNNs, you look at all of the previous improvements that had led us to what we thought were AI, they were so very much deterministic. Like, if I had the time, I could sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and explain exactly what calculation led to every single thing, right? Every single conclusion. When your Tesla sees a car in front of it and it says that's a car, like, we knew exactly what the process was that led it to draw that conclusion. But what we're really seeing with LLM is that with the sheer density of the model, the way that it's trained, the way that the transformer attention architecture is actually structured, it leads to this unexpected behavior. And I, you know, like we of course can't talk about just a single specific LLM, because I mean, you know, I'm sure in 5 years, GPT-4 is going to feel very old and very quaint. I'm sure we are going to continue to improve on the path of what's already come. So I really think that the folks who are still taking a traditional systematic deterministic way of thinking about what a computer program is, and therefore an LLM is a Turing machine and it behaves in a certain way, I think they're not getting it.
Okay. Great. That's, yeah, very clear answer. So if I may rephrase it, so as a market solution provider, even though this LLM model may not lead to 100% deterministic result, but that maybe 99% or 97% might be good enough, you know, for many practical applications, right? At this phase.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if we're now, so that was more
You
my
decide that
philosophical
hallucination that might because of the
Yeah.
lacking faculty to
Yeah.
grasp causation, the hallucination, not, yeah.
So my excitement about and my conviction about LLMs is that at a philosophical perspective, again, at 100-year, 500-year, a 1,000-year time horizon, we've done something, we've unlocked something that's really gonna change our lives in a fundamental way. On a very pragmatic investor perspective, or as a user perspective, or as a founder perspective, to answer the question that
Right.
you just said, and the point that Dee also made, I think we have a lot of things to learn about how to properly commercialize in a product based on LLM. And I think that the hallucination problem, it's not a hallucination anymore, because we have tools that we built to kind of manage some of that, but just the unpredictable aspect of how current generation of LLMs function means that the way that we think about products has to change. We would not buy a dishwasher where if we turned it on, 95% of the time it cleaned your dishes and 5% of the time it made them worse, right? Like we just would not tolerate that. Our relationship with tools has always been a very much deterministic. I use you in a specific way. And to now have a tool that fails 5%, 10%, 15% of the time, it fails in a very unpredictable way. Like I think that's a real challenge.
That's
So what
my
I'm seeing,
concern.
so what I'm seeing, yeah, what I'm seeing with my startups, as now we're one year into this, and I should say that we've invested in probably 35 to 40 companies in that category now. What I'm seeing with our startups is that they're recognizing that this is gonna probably be a service. It's probably not gonna be a product. It's not gonna be something that you install on your computer and you hit run and it's just gonna do some task for you. Instead, most consumers, most businesses will want a human in the loop. So there will be someone who monitors your dishwasher and says, "Oh, that came back. That's not clean. I'm gonna push the power button again."
Great. Awesome. So did you have also something to say regarding the correlation versus causation and its practical implications? I'm sorry, but I don't have a curtain in my study, so sorry, but luckily you only need to hear me.
I think actually it's very great for us to create more new product. I also agree with Chong that actually typically I think that the year of chatbot has gone. So the new product that we will create is no longer a chatbot itself. You see, we used to say conversational AI, but actually this is not just a conversation. This is actually about the chain of thought. This about the MOE. That is the thing. You know, my team used to create a lot of chaos. Several years ago, we create a chatbot named Tay, that is US XiaoIce, released on Twitter, and within 24 hours become a biased person. That year, actually, we are doing this kind of product. And for now, actually, we need to have new ideas about the product itself.
Great. So this will lead to our second question. So as Cho and Dee, you said we are basically at this inflection point, historical moment. But you know, this reminds me of a co-founder of Intel, Andy Grove. He used to say that, you know, during this, when a brand new industry is being formed during this transition period, it might be extremely difficult for us to discern the future. Actually, I believe the metaphor he used was a phase. He said in the beginning, we look at one phase, then gradually just as we are staring at this phase, it's gradually turning into another brand new phase. So what's something big in the beginning may be forgotten later, and something small in the beginning might grow into a giant. So he said this several decades ago, but I also feel it's similarly true in describing of the challenges many in the AI commercialization field is facing today as well. So as you know, we are turning from the technology to concrete demands of consumers of sustainable values. You know, many challenges will appear, and it's very difficult for us to see the future clearly. But despite the challenges, I think also there's underlying guardrail essentially still there, which is, you know, the essential question is, how do we leverage this technology, this powerful technology, very powerful tool, to make people's lives better? So I wonder, you know, could you please share some of your thoughts on how generative AI in a short term and in a long term could create that actual value, that huge maybe actual value to make our lives better? Chong?
Sure. I can go first. I think the way that LMs are going to make our lives better is going to be very different from country to country, society to society. In the US, I think the trend is very clear. So many of the companies that we have invested in, that we're investing in right now, are focused on one thing: to use the ALM to replace a human being. I mean, I'm seeing it for home services, for plumbers. I'm seeing it for hospitals. I'm seeing it for, obviously, a lot of them are in customer facing roles, but it's not just that. In document processing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the US, with a very high cost of labor, businesses are seeing immediate value from doing this. And I'm really very, actually, and I think this is a good topic for discussion as well, but I am very concerned about what that means for the employment rate, and the wealth gap in the US. I think there's a lot of threat. And I think for other countries, and I'm not even going to talk about China here, because I know we have a section coming up about that, and I'm sure Dee probably has a lot to say about that as well. But I'm also very excited about the impact that LLM is going to have on the rest of the world. For the last 60 years, what we've seen with technology is that it tended to increase the global wealth gap, right? When we had the PC, it made the first world even more efficient. When we had the internet, it made the first world even more efficient. When we got to cell phones and everything else, and SaaS and AI, it's a lot of it went to make the US and the EU, the Western countries, even more successful, because their employees were so much more productive. They were the ones that were able to afford the cutting edge of that whole field. I think the LMs have the potential of changing that. And I of course I accept that the most advanced models will probably be trained and available in the West first. But I think even the open source models that are available now, that are not first generation, they don't require a lot of compute to run. Their ability to run inference is actually pretty reasonable. And yet the amount of information that they contain, and the knowledge that they contain, is going to be remarkable. In the past, if you have, in Africa, let's say, if you have a someone who excels in school, who had one of the few spots to attend a top institution in Africa, was trained to become a doctor, it was exceedingly difficult for the African country to hold on to that talent, right? Because we all know that that person has a much higher pay if he or she moves to the Europe or to the US. And that applies to engineers, to coders, or to anything else. So for the third world to retain that expert knowledge for the last 50 years has been almost impossible. With an LLM, that's all different. We're going to see physicians, teachers, right? We're going to have first class, top tier teachers in every corner on the planet. And I just think that is such a powerful concept. But it also goes beyond teaching. Think about the fact that now you're you own a small business in Argentina, and perhaps in the past you didn't know how to do sales and marketing. You didn't know how to promote your product to a global environment, and you ended up having to sell your product at a very cheap price to a distributor in the US, who would then do the real value capturing work of creating the brand and the packaging and putting it into the distribution channel, right? And we all know that those companies, those channels, acquired so much of the incremental value. Well, with an LLM world, that could fundamentally change, because this person who owns a farm in Argentina now knows exactly how to market it, how to package it, how to sell it. So I'm very excited about that.
That's very optimistic. Yeah. I really hope that it sounds like, if we develop it while the generative AI could, empower individuals, not only in the developed countries, but also in developing countries. So Dee, let me turn to you. So what are your thoughts about that actual value generative AI can create?
Yeah, several months ago, I talked to Qilu. We also agree that actually most of the people recently using large language model, this new technology to do transactions. But we actually believe that maybe the correct answer is there is another option that you make the new technology to build a deeper relationship. And maybe the deeper relationship, or maybe deep relationship, or your so-called EQ is very important for the true value. And we do have some stories that in Japan, our brand in Japan named Lina, not XiaoIce. In Japan, Lina helped Japan government to do a very great job. There are around 300,000 families who have only elder people at home, and we help government to create assistant to their family into their home to help them, and also report the elder people's status to the government so that government can improve their service. But one of the key thing is that we make a lot of tools to help elder people can easily iterate their own assistant at home into any instance that they want. And most of the elder people actually create such kind of AI beings into their relatives. Maybe their close friends, since they are still young. Their grandsons, something like that. It's very interesting that after they create such kind of instance, rather than Siri or some brand, this grandson tells the elder people that you need to have a pill. You need to run the plan that we want you to. It will be good to your health. Actually, the conversion rate is super high. So the deeper relationship actually is very important. And this kind of instance are all nobodies. Your grandson means nothing to me actually, but the deep relationship actually can really run a large conversion rate. And you'll see maybe for example, like in China, we do AI salesperson for like the biggest bank in China, and you see two human salesperson are actually not so different to each other, but their commercial result may be super different. It's not because their skills, it's because their EQs. So that deep relationship is actually build the high value, and we cares about the high value. And this high value for the new technology is very exciting that new technology help us to make it to be even more personalized in a very, very easy way that everyone can do it. That can really change the world, I believe. So deep relationship vs transactions, I think both are correct answers. Yeah. But most of the people cares about transactions. Yeah.
Well, maybe for now, but that's great food for thought actually, because on top of my head, there's a lot of pros to this deep relationship between human beings and AI agents, or AI beings in XiaoIce terminology. And we could have really personal teachers, personal assistants, personal companions, which kind of reminds me of the movie Her. It's a great movie, by the way. But I think, but it also reminds me of the, a risk there. But, regarding if the deeper relationship is between the human being and the AI being, then there might be some ethical concern. But we'll talk about that in a short while. So let me ask Chong some more individual questions. So could you please tell us briefly about Berkeley SkyDeck Fund and its investments in generative AI? You mentioned you invested 35 to 40, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've lost track, and especially since a lot of our companies are starting to, even if they weren't originally generative AI, obviously in the last year, they're including those features since it's so critical. So Berkeley SkyDeck is the official startup accelerator for UC Berkeley. A lot of you might be familiar with the name. The Berkeley SkyDeck Fund is the private venture capital fund that's paired up with that program. So we invest in 40 companies per year that goes through the program. We invest 200K into each of the 40. In most cases, we are usually the first institutional check-in, or we're coming in at exactly the same time as some early pre-seed funds. But we wouldn't be investing into the seed or into the A round. Our goal to really provide that ramp between I have a great idea, I have a product that I want to build, I have some early funding from friends and family, I have some early funding from angels, to now I want to be on track for raising a $5 million seed. I would say most of our companies that graduate are aiming for that $3 to $5 million seed round, and then 12 to 18 months after that, they're out there for that 10 to $20 million A, and 12 months after that, they're out there for the 20 to 60 million B, etc. So they're trying to figure out how do I get on that pathway, and we give them the language, the expertise, the connections, the insight to make that possible. What's really interesting about SkyDeck, I don't know how in depth we want to get. It's probably not that critical, but what's really interesting about it is that SkyDeck is not just a platform for Berkeley. Okay, so that's a common misconception, because people, as soon as they hear that term, they assume we're sort of in that bucket of a classic school platform that helps alumni and faculty, etc., spin out stuff. We do that task, and we're very proud about that, and we love to tap into the talent and the deal flow at Berkeley, but we're much more than that. The Berkeley side of their deal flow is only about a third. 2/3 of our companies, the ones that we invest in, have no ties to Berkeley at all. In fact, they're all global founders. So there are companies they're founding teams and companies that are not built in the US. Okay, so I want to repeat that, because it's such a weird concept for a lot of people. 2/3 of the companies that we invest in, that we put through the program at Berkeley SkyDeck, have no previous ties to the UC. They're just brilliant engineers. They are technologists. They're hustlers, and they realize that in much of the world, they don't have that access to the venture ecosystem that we have in the Bay Area. So they want to come to Berkeley to establish those ties. They want to hire here. They want to find collaborators here. They want to find customers here. And then, of course, after 6 months in our program, they want to fundraise here. And then the last thing I'll say about how our fund works. So we've now raised 2 funds. We're about to raise Fund 3. We have 100 million in funds raised so far. With that 100 million, we've invested in about 250 to 270, I believe, companies in total. They span a wide range of fields, ranging from semiconductors to robotics, to clean tech, to new chemistries for batteries, to pharma, and of course to a lot of SaaS and AI. not as much in the consumer side, because we do have a bias in terms of leveraging the Berkeley ecosystem to help companies with a deep technical edge. So a consumer-facing company is probably not one that we would be able to add a lot of additional value to. In terms of Gen AI, we've always been pretty strong in AI as a field. Our past companies include Crisp, which came through our program in 2018, and they used AI for noise cancellation. Super Annotate, which is in the computer vision space, etc. So we've always had a very strong foundation there, in part because of how strong Berkeley is as a platform for cutting edge AI research. But Gen AI, we were also pretty early to it. So even before the launch of GPT 3.5 in late 2022, I believe, we had already invested in a couple of companies. They were already using GPT 3.0. The chat GPT hadn't launched yet, so people were still kind of like, really, is this a thing? So we were a little ahead of the game there. About a year ago, with the launch of Chat GPT, we said, this is amazing. It's time to step on the gas, and we invested in just every company that we could find that we thought was interesting, and there weren't that many of them. I mean, there were only maybe 7 or 8 in the batch from a year ago. The batch 6 months ago, we were able to ramp that up to now probably about 10 to 12. Now probably half the cohort, if not more, had a Gen AI emphasis and had an approach and had a thought process. And now when I think about to the next batch, we're actually going through that selection process as we speak, where we look at 2,000 pitches, and we're actually trying to filter from 2,000 teams that apply down to just the 20 that we're going to invest in. So it's a very, very selective process. But I suspect that of the 20, like 90% will have a Gen AI component to it, because it's where the opportunity is. You look at, we're not chasing it now. I mean, I admit a year ago, to some degree, we were chasing it. A year ago, we weren't sure exactly where the LLM use cases would be, and we said we just want to invest in smart people, period, and they'll figure it out. Now we've backed off that. Now we're no longer just saying, hey, I want to put more capital work in Gen AI. We want to find good companies building products that we think the market wants. And it just turns out that almost all of them are doing that with LLM, because it just adds so much financial value.
Wow. So 2000 to 20, that's very rigorous selection. So can you share some of your criteria, like, roughly for selecting the potential winners?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of it. So we have our ultimate goal, the ultimate KPI that we are tracking ourselves on is the percentage of our companies that can raise the next round, right? So I to a large degree, what we want is what we know the VCs want. The VCs that come after us, that write the $5 million checks, the $10 million checks, the $50 million checks. We've over the years really figured out what makes a difference for them. Now, of course, we have to move that forward. I mean, these companies that we're investing in, the VCs are not investing in them yet because they haven't hit those bars. They haven't, whatever it is the VCs want, they're not seeing it, right? So it's up to us to kind of work with the founders to figure out where the gaps are, and to which ones. There are some gaps that we can fix. There are some gaps that we cannot fix. So what are the gaps that we cannot fix? Let's start there. We can't help you if you don't understand your customer. Okay, you need to come in and have a deep grasp of the problem that you want to solve, and now we can help you pivot that. We can absolutely. Maybe it turns out that your customer is just a small segment of what you thought your customer was. Maybe the way that you price it and the way that you market it is not what you had in mind. That's all okay. We can help you figure that out. But you have to come in knowing what the pain point is. I mean, that's a better way of saying it. You might not know who the customer is, but you better have a strong thesis that you can back up on what the pain point is. Um, uh, and if you don't, boy, it's not our job to fix that. I think the second thing that we really can't fix is just founder abilities in general. There are certain class of founders. It's really not about their quote unquote ability to sell. We don't really love consultants as a category, right? We don't really need people who can stand up in front of a room and pitch extremely well. That's not very high on our list. But you should be able to demonstrate your curiosity and your intelligence and we shouldn't be able to stump you by asking you a question about your your chosen field, right? What your competitors are doing. Why are they doing it that way? Why are your customers buying it this way? Why aren't they buying it a different way? What is it about your technology? What are the fundamental constraints of where that's going to be? The kind of founders that we want has sat there and mulled over all of those thoughts and has a pretty compelling answer to a lot of those. And if we manage to come up with a question that they haven't thought about before, which does happen, the right founder can react and come up with something that's really or say, here's how I'm going to answer that question, right? Here's who I would ask, here's the experiment that I would run, here's the feature that I'm going to build to solve that question.
Wonderful. Yeah, so that really helps. I just have one last question regarding the criteria is, Dee mentioned that for commercialization, you need this two-step value creation and monetization, a good business model as well. So is that business model a must for you? Or as long as they know the pinpoint of the customers, they could add value there, the business model, you could work together on that?
I think the way to think about it is to go a little bit later in time. By the time you raise your Series A, okay, so your Series A is usually 10 to 25 million, let's say, in that range. That is a round that you will only be able to unlock if you can say, I know who my customer is, I know how much they're going to pay, I know what my pricing model is, and I just want more money to scale it up. Okay, so that's the point where you better have your business model sharp. Now, I'm not talking about companies like Anthropic or Mithril. There's all of these great, especially in the Gen AI space, there are companies that are just having money thrown at them to pay for lots of GPUs. That's a different class. I'm talking about a normal company that's fundraising on the basis of what it's achieved. By the A, you better have that. Let's go 12 months prior to the A, when you're at the seed, you should have a couple customers. Maybe you haven't completely proven exactly how you're going to acquire them yet. Maybe you haven't exactly figured out the right customer profile. The story is not super sharp, but you should have a couple customers. That's a seed. We are before the seed. I have no problem. I mean, if you come in with all of those things, that's great. Although let's think through why, if you have those things, VCs are not investing in you at the A. What is it that you are missing? That's something that we're definitely going to have to dive into. But we're very, very comfortable if you have no customers, no pricing model, no business model, right? And because what we want to do is over the 6 months you're at SkyDeck, help you run through the experiments, help you talk to the right people to figure those things out.
Great. So do you have any preference for the particular location on the value chain of the startup companies? If I can roughly divide value chain to, for example, the infrastructure, including the hardware and cloud service, and then the foundational models, usually the training is very expensive. Then maybe on top of that, more consumer face or enterprise face, but eventually facing the consumers, development tools and applications. Do you have any preference?
We don't have a preference in the sense of what we want to see. I mean, one of my favorite parts of my job is looking at 2,000 pitches every 6 months and just being wow, like, oh my God, that's possible. Like, that's really interesting. So I don't think we have a very fixed view that says if you're like this, don't apply to us. That's not how we go about it. But that said, there are certain businesses that we know will be really hard, and we're gonna come to you with certain questions. Like as you said, foundational models. You're gonna need $100 million. Like, and why are you gonna be better? We also deal a lot with companies in space, right? It's gotten a lot better. It's gotten cheaper to get to space, but it's still expensive, right? We also deal with companies in pharma. It's like, what, you're gonna need a lot of money. So the bar for what you have to do for us to put in 200K is now very different. How do we unlock the next 100 million? And on the other extreme for consumers, I'll just say, we know that consumer startups, they tend to be a matter of luck and instinct, and it's like trying to make a Hollywood hit. You can't really like create that from scratch, at least, right? I mean, if you're taking an established franchise and you're just coming back for the next one, that's a different story. But if you're creating something from scratch, who knows what's going to work and what's not going to work? It's very, very challenging. So for a consumer startup, we're almost always show us the data, show us that you have a core group of real users and the metrics are there and the engagement's there and the retention is there. And if so, then we will do it. But if you came to me and you pitched a great consumer product that you've thought through in your head and you think, people are going to use it, it's probably not going to be a fit for us.
Great, awesome. I have one last question for you, Chlon, in this round. So you are currently on a trip to China, right? Business trip to China. So can you share some of your observations of the AI startups there?
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you one minor correction. I'm not on a business trip to China. So ever since 2020 with COVID, I've actually been based in China. I live in China. My family, my kids, all live in China. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. So you have more to tell us then.
Well, I mean, I don't invest in China. Like from a professional SkyDeck perspective, all of that is purely from Berkeley, and I fly back and forth. I make 12 to 13 trips per year, so it's pretty tiring. From a Gen AI point of view, so yeah, I don't see a great deal of deal flow in China. So I don't want to pretend to be an expert, but I have seen enough to draw some conclusions. The biggest one is that the different cost of labor really translates into very different types of businesses being viable in China versus being viable in the US. In the US, VCs continue to love B2B. B2B SaaS continues to be the favorite kind of company that I would say 80% of the VCs in the Valley specialize in. And that's because we know how businesses buy. We know that if you help a business increase their sales, decrease their costs, there is a very good chance that as long as there's, you can navigate the buying process, etc. We know that businesses want that and they will pay for it. And if you're building a piece of software, we know it's very viable. Very different in China, very different culture, but underlying a lot of it is the cost of labor, right? Making labor 10% more efficient in China is just not super high value. And asking a company to lay off 10% of their workforce because you save them 10% of the cost, like that's just not how most larger enterprises in China think. That's just not in their DNA. So that's not really going to be a thing. And also the low cost of labor means a lot of business prefer to build instead of buy. Why would I buy something when you talk about banks or anyone else? I mean, they have massive teams of teams of devs that are all quite good and can build great enterprise grade systems. So Gen AI, I think it's going to be. I don't know enough about what's happening on the consumer side, but certainly on the B2B side, I think adoption in China will be slower than it is in the US.
Thank you so much. Chuan was terrific. Let me temporarily turn to Dee. So Dee, I still remember, my first visit to Microsoft that back then Xiaobing was still Microsoft XiaoIce. I was in 2017 when I was still teaching at Tsinghua School of Law, and my colleagues and I visited your quarter there. We were very impressed of the things XiaoIce was able to do. That was, I think, 3 years. That was in 2017, so 3 years till GPT-3 came out. So that was also when I started to be really interested in the interplay of intellectual property and AIGC. So fast forward to today, could you maybe first briefly introduce this journey, 10-year journey of XiaoIce to us? It was established in 2014, right?
Yeah, 2014. At that time, actually, we were doing the work about Cortana, a Microsoft AI assistant, and while we are developing Cortana, we figure out that there may be another path. So we individually built, because at that time I was the GM of Bing search engine in Asia. So we built up the XiaoIce team. Yeah.
Great. So
yeah.
Do you want to share your screen? I know you prepared some deck for this introduction.
Okay. I think maybe I can go without the deck.
Oh, the deck.
You know, we start to became a low-key team after Tay. I mean, US XiaoIce. But actually, we are not low-key in the market and in the business. From the technology side, actually, we are very cutting edge. For example, like we are the first one who developed the full duplex websites 1 year before Google to use duplex. And recently, actually, we have a famous Chinese musician named Bao Xiaobo to revive his daughter. Actually, that kind of work, we started that work since from 2017. Actually, we held the patent about how to create AI being cloner with the chat text data and voice data and social media data, and that was so-called the Black Mirror patent. And we used to use generation model back to in 2017, use generation model purely in Indonesia market. And even for now, actually, the top 10 China automobile user, 6 of 10 China top 10 automobile, while you talk to the car, actually you will talk to XiaoIce. But we are not selling the technology. That means we are not a large language model company. We are an AI being company. We sell the product, not the technology itself. Although our large language model, for example, like in Japan, actually, if you go to Hugging Face, then 7 of 10 top rated and downloaded large language model are actually coming from XiaoIce. But we are not selling we are not in such kind of large language model company. And we have the XiaoIce framework. That framework help us to run on all the AI beings. We split AI beings into 3 types. The first type is novelty instance. So currently we help people to create almost 700,000 such kind of instance, their relatives, close friend, and their own. And we have the second path is about somebody instance, especially for B2B or B2C AI being employees. And we now have 20,000 such kind of employees. And if our customer, if our enterprise, they want to bid, actually currently our win rate is more than 80%, and our customer renewal rate is 100%.
Wow.
And we also built super AI being, that means celebrities, singers, and artists. We choose celebrities, not superstars, because celebrities super energized. And we now have already have 4,000 celebrities cloner. And each celebrity has more than 50,000 500,000 followers to 1.3 million followers. And it's very interesting that every time while a user come to pay for $30, for example, for our service, actually our GPU cost is $5. That is so-called high value. And we don't serve free user. We only serve paying user. That is because we used to have such kind of failures to selling technologies. While we are still Microsoft XiaoIce, purely owned by Microsoft, that we must follow the story and the rules about Azure. So we helped Azure to win customer top. For example, like at that time, for Japan market, more than a half top brand of their customers are actually coming from AWS to Azure because of XiaoIce. Azure is just a storage, and you need the application, and XiaoIce is the application. But we taste the failure, like Lawson. Lawson is one of the top supermarkets player in Japan. And Lawson at that time had 20 million users in its private domain, means Line or something like that. And Lawson wanted to monetize this 20 million users to selling coupon to them. And the metric that Lawson see is the conversion rate within 3 days. The user used the coupon to go to the supermarket to do it. And their previous way to selling coupon, the conversion rate no more than 10%. And we make a very good AI being named Akiko at that time. Akiko is a Lawson's such kind of assistant to help to do this job. And the Akiko's conversion rate about coupon within 3 days is 57%.
Wow.
So we actually for every time we actually help Lawson to have revenue of millions, and we only have thousands of thousands.
So that's
Because
yeah.
that is because we charge by API call. You create high value. You help your customer to earn a lot of money, but your customer only treat you as a call. That is even because become my muscle memory. So you need to do something different. So we do a lot of more that to make the AI be as the product and not the individual technologies that help people to do a lot of things. Yeah.
So when did that
So-
transition happen? That was very interesting because it sounds like that you have found the sweet spot of value creation and monetizing on that value you created.
Yeah, we want to attend the end game of the revenue share, because we actually we do change the end game. So we need to have the revenue share from the end game. That is our philosophy. But why and how can you change the end game and charge from the end game's revenue share? You need to do a lot more. For example, like ChatGPT or something like that is product very much closer to technology itself.
Right.
So we need to do such kind of we have similar technology, no matter what, and no matter how, you need to create product and the model closer to the end game. That is the difference. Yeah.
So productizing, if I can use that word, the technology may be quite challenging. It really depends on the specific circumstances. You really have to know the market well, like as Chong said, you really need to find that pen spot, your customers.
Yeah. You think as a technology person, I talked continuously about business model. Actually, is actually my ego about technology. Because you see, loss and case from my point of view is a shame on me. You create so much, but you can earn so little. So that is I think the case.
But you made that transition already.
Yeah, it's quite hard. It's quite hard. While you are doing such kind of transition, you also need to take care that maybe your competitors, they always said, oh, we are free to get users. They experienced in such kind of tactics. So that is why we only serve paying user, because none of your competitors can serve paying user with a free tactic.
Yeah, I think the free strategy might be, quite attractive in the beginning, but to keep the customers in the long term,
but for the new year, maybe it's not no longer work anymore because the traffic is super expensive.
Right.
The traffic is super expensive. No, and for your paying user, for example, like for ChatGPT, if you pay subscription to the app for $20, and actually the cost to serve you is almost $20. Yeah. So for the paying user, you're almost break even. Then where is the revenue? Where is the profit that you can serve a large amount of free user? And
Right.
while you have more and more paying user, you have a large more and more free user. It's not gonna work. But it's not in every some of the area, or maybe if the technology iterate in another way, things may change. But we don't dream about it. We are very realistic because we have been already do it for 10 years. Yeah.
Good. So I have one last question, Dee, for you in this run. So this AI being or AI agent or AI being, that's one of the primary business models XiaoIce is having now. It creates a lot of values, including emotional values for the consumers, as you explained, the three groups are. But by its very nature, because these beings would closely interact with consumers, so how does XiaoIce navigate this inherent ethical considerations? Like, do you have any measures that you implement to ensure maybe privacy and security in user interaction with these AI beings? You introduce
we care about security and privacy very much. Maybe we are the most we are the one that cares that most in China market. But from long-term relationship or deep relationship actually runs on trust. The biggest value is the trust, and the transaction runs on usage. I mean, if you already frequently need to write papers, and you figure out that large language model can help you to write papers, good. Then the usage is there. But deep relationship runs on trust. So that is why we care so much about privacy and security, because that is the value. But for the new year of the technology innovation, it's very interesting that, from my perspective, large language model, one of the most great part of it is that it knows so well about persuading. The persuading capability is so good. So if you use the persuading capability into a wrong way, that is terrible. But if you do it to kill people and to chase for any chance to make people to love you and to believe you that you do good for him, and then you can have an even faster way to create such kind of trust.
Yeah, that just again reminds me of a sort of a cliche, but it's so true that with great capability comes great
it's very interesting.
responsibilities.
While we for years ago, while we trying to do EQ, I used to think that EQ is emotional, and sooner or later I figure out that emotional is low EQ. The EQ is very, very rational. People who have EQ, people who have EQ can take care of everything, control everything. So
balance.
the EQ, the high EQ person knows when to throw out a topic to make you feel comfortable, to make you talk, and to make you stop, and to change to another topic. So the EQ is such kind of capability. The persuading capability is most important part of it.
Right, but that in order to make people comfortable, that I know your point in rationality is needed, but also doesn't need empathy to feel what the other person is feeling. And do you think AI can do that? This might be a little far-fetched, but
that is so-called empathy model.
the empathy.
The empathy model is also always trying to respond, and in parallel, in the meantime, trying to watch out what is happening and choose the tactic that what will happen in the following way. Chain of thought, do it well.
Oh, very interesting. I could chat with you for that on that for an hour, but I should have asked Chlon about this question too, because so in SkyDeck, how do you ensure? Do you have any guardian rails to ensure ethical and accountable AI? It's a similar topic with.
Yeah, it's something that we certainly we think about, but we think about it from the perspective of that we use on all of the long-term risks. We know that for you to succeed as a business, these are guardrails you need to have around your business in the long run. But that said, I was actually on a panel talking about this exact same topic. I really think that it's the companies, it's the founders that have already achieved a certain amount of scale, that have raised billions. The Anthropics and the OpenAIs, they need to take the lead, and they need to set up processes and give us tools to achieve those things. The founders that I work with are early stage folks who have taken out a mortgage on their home, who are paying themselves a nothing or a tiny amount of money for 2, 3, 4 years in order to achieve a dream. And I think they have to be focused on one thing, which is getting their product to market, finding a customer that will pay for it, and then figuring out things from there on out.
Good. Okay. I see we have about like 10 to 15 minutes to go. Let me have a look if we receive any questions from the audience. Miss Hou老师 from IP House, did you receive any question on a live stream? And because I can't see them, I can only see the Zoom end. Okay, I didn't hear any response. So maybe we just use the, so for our audience, if you have any question for our panelists, please feel free to use the chat function to ask them. At the same time, maybe Chong, I was worried about the time just now, but I was gonna ask you, could you share one or two impressive examples of the AI commercialization during your investment in the past? Yes.
Yeah, boy, it's hard to talk about impressive because everything is so early. When I think about impressive, I work very closely with founders that raised $300 million, $400 million, and I think that's impressive. That by itself is very, very impressive. But I think in terms of product traction, we're just so early days of figuring these things out. I will point out, I will talk about one company that I like to point to as just sort of how flexible and how agile you have to be, and why I'm hopeful about them. There's something called Roger. We invested in them about 12 months ago. They were fresh new grads. They had just completed their masters. They really didn't know what they wanted to work on, except they wanted to be in LLMs. They came in with a demo that showed an LLM being used. Actually, he actually talked about this use case as a sort of a friendly companion for senior citizens at home. The primary use case was mostly reminders, right? Like, hey, please make sure you took these pills. Make sure to check in on did you eat, etc. We knew pretty quickly that was not the right product to go to market with in the US, because we didn't really think that there would be a market. We didn't think that payers would pay for a long time, and we also thought that consumers would have a hard time saying, I'm going to pay for an AI to keep my grandmother company. Like just from a positioning perspective, that'd be a really hard product to sell. So they ended up going in a direction that they knew nothing about, right? I mean, like, so this is like 2 or 3 months in. All we said was, take your core concept, take your core technology, and look at every vertical possible. Like, what are the use cases where this thing could be applied? And they ended up pivoting into the home health field. So home health, it's a broad bucket, but it broadly refers to at-home nurses that come to your home post, you went to the hospital for a surgery or a procedure, and now you're home, and you're bedridden, but certainly you're home now, and a nurse comes by once every 3 days, once a week for the next 3 months to check your labs, to check your blood pressure, to make sure you're eating and you're exercising and all of that stuff. Turns out that workflow for the businesses that manage the home health agencies, that manages the nurses that goes to your home, they're the ones that have a real pain point. They're the ones that are struggling to make the nurses more efficient in that process, make sure that the conversation is 100% correct and accurate, and it documents it. There's a lot of forms that they have to fill out. They hate it when they go to on a visit and the person is not home. They just forgot to cancel. So they're building out a whole suite of tools for that vertical on the basis of an LLM, and they've really only been at this vertical for the last maybe 3-4 months, and it's going extremely well. They're working very closely with just a few homes initially to make sure they get the product right, but at this point the nurses love the product, and they're actually saying, hey, can we please bring you to the other firm, because a lot of them, they're freelancers and they work for more than one home health agency, the product is so compelling, they want to push it, which is in healthcare, that's one of the hardest challenges, to get to the point where the user wants to actually to use it.
So really solve that conventional bottleneck in the healthcare chain. Thank you so much. I received several questions from the audience actually, so I'm gonna ask from the top. We have Tana Christensen to the panelists. What's the biggest surprise you've encountered in your experience with AI in the last 12 months?
I'll go first. I mean, I already spoke to this a little bit. It is surprising to me how inconsistent it continues to be, and how much of a challenge that brings to all of the B2B use cases that I described. It turns out that not having that a stable API that you can just call and get back like a fixed answer, it really makes you change a lot of things in how your business can be built.
Dee, do you have any? You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I just said that I try my best to keep calm. Actually, you know, the very much surprised me is the speed of iteration of the technology. You know, sometimes we need to care about a lot of such kind of things. If while the technology kept innovation, kept iterate, then it will make the product to be hard to go down to the earth. It's very much like while I was a kid, and sometimes in some period I grow very fast. Then at that time I don't have clothes to wear, because my parents do not want to buy clothes for me, because I grow very fast. So the last 12 months, actually, the technology kept innovating. So that is super different to the previous time. Yeah.
And exciting too. Yeah. I guess now panelists can see the questions yourself. So the next one from Jamie Panna, what will be the new business model? I guess this was targeted at D when you were talking about the new business model that really improves the monetization.
Yeah, I think the next phase of the industry is a high add value, because large language model and the new coming technology actually represent to high add value. So the business model need to somehow reflect to the high add value. So I don't think API call represent that. And I think revenue share is one of the models that represent it. So I think the new business model, no matter how, need to do that. Revenue share is only one of the options, and that is what we are trying. Yeah.
So the next questions from Marcel Green to Chung. Do you mean that founders are more focused on getting to market than making sure the tech is safe?
Yeah, I think, you know, the word founder is so broad, because Elon Musk is a founder, and so is, you know, the grad student who has 100K in loans and is not working just so that she can build a new company. So I think we have to segment and be clear who we are talking about. I do think the providers of the foundational models have a responsibility, a moral responsibility, and I am supportive of the government being involved, the regulators being involved, to transform that into a legal responsibility, to make sure that the models that they provide are safe. But I think for the founders who are just trying to solve a problem, that they've found in the broader world. They're trying to address a pain point. They are trying to beat the odds because I think most of us know, in case you don't know, probably 98% of the companies that get formed out there don't make it. They just die, right? So I think the founders need to be focused on in the early days of their company construction on finding that wedge, on finding that pain point, on getting the product to market. Of course, I would also counsel them to be aware that there's no point in putting in 2 or 3 years of hard work and then only to realize that you are building something that's unethical. You're spamming people. You're exploiting loopholes that you know will be closed. Like that's just not a good use of your time. So for that reason, for very practical reasons, you should focus on products that you think the market will adopt in the long run.
Great. So the next questions from Kosha Doshi to the panelists. In the context of discussing guardrails for AI and addressing ethical and privacy concerns, how do you view the emergence of AI red teaming as a crucial approach for identifying flaws and vulnerabilities, especially within language models? Cho and Dee, do you know this AI red teaming approach?
Yeah, I can take that if Dee doesn't want to. I do think it's a very important approach. I think there was a lot of discussion about that in the context of Google and Gemini, because there was a thought that perhaps it had been overly red teamed, right? It was overly adjusted to be very PC and not say certain things, etc. I think regardless of where you stand on that debate, I think the bottom line is that these, as a society, I do think it's important that we have that in place. We need people who are actively looking to understand what's not working.
Right. So the last question from Marcel Green to Dee, with the cultural differences between China and the United States, couldn't AI's EQ be different in the Chinese AI and American AI?
Yeah, of course, it's quite different. We used to have a China team, Japan team, in Indonesia team, India team, and American team. Why it's different? Because EQ is actually based on culture and the behaviors of different crowd. So for this kind of capability is very much not localization. You need to locally build it. So it's because it's culture. Sometimes a lot of other tactics or technologies are actually just the localization is okay, but culture is definitely not. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Dee. We still have 2 minutes to go, so I really want to ask a last question. I know, Dee, maybe you don't want to answer the question. I'm gonna direct to Chuan, but I'm really curious about your thoughts, Chuan, regarding this recent. Maybe some of the audience know this recent split. Sort of philosophical, the difference between effective accelerationism, shorthanded as EAC, versus alignment school. So in a nutshell, the EAC school believes that the technological advancement is by itself is good, is great. So there shouldn't be any force to get in the way, because in the end, technology will take care of any concern we have. To me, it's kind of similar to this technology determinism throughout the 20th century. Now, on the other hand, the so-called alignment school argues that in the end, the eternal value of AI, generative AI, should be aligned with humanistic values. So we really have to slow down a way for regulation to catch up and to reflect as human beings. Is the superior technology advancement serving our humanistic goals. I'm very interested in this because I'm a IP scholar, and I think this would have a lot of implications on a IP practice. For example, AI might believe that the data, even copyrighted data, should be free to use, fair use by training, because that serves the technological advancement. Then on the other hand, some people, the alignment just believes that this may not be entirely consistent with the humanistic. So sorry, I said too much, but Joan, what's your view on this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting example that you just made, and it's one that I hadn't really thought about before. So I think that's an excellent point. I actually think when I think about the rise of AI and LLMs, I am concerned. I think I'm clearly, I don't know that I'm in either camp. I'm not saying that I believe that we should. I definitely don't believe we should step full force on the gas pedal and go as fast as possible, because I see a lot of threats. I also don't know that I believe it's practical we can step on the brakes, or that I want necessarily the government to have a very deep involvement in the regulation. For me, the biggest risk for AI and LLMs is the fact that we're now enabling them to write code, and we're enabling to be open source. I don't know that I think a lot about AGI and what's going to happen when there's a superior AI intelligence. I don't know if I really believe that's X years away or not. I don't know the answer to that, but I just do believe that self-replicating code is a scary thing. Even it's not intentionally an evil super intelligence. The fact that we will have, there's so many, all of our systems are interconnected. There's so much compute out there. There's so much storage out there. And now you have code, you have programs that can code and can improve themselves. I think that's a pretty scary concept, and we should be concerned.
It scares me too. Thank you so much, Chong. That actually so our third talk will be on fair use, how fair is fair use in AI age, and the fourth talk will be about AI governance and regulations. So for our audience who is still interested in this theme, we'll talk more in the following talks. So I just want to give my heartfelt thanks to our amazing panelists. Thank you so much, Chong and Dee. I learned a lot from you. And thank you so much for now strong technical support, Justin, Richard, and Ms. Ho, and from IP House live streaming. And last but not least, thank you so much now audience for staying up with us so late. So have a great day and night. See you soon.